Good afternoon, and welcome to the AGO.ca. I'm Stephan Jost, the Michael and Sonja Koerner Director and CEO of the Art Gallery of Ontario. This afternoon, I've got the great fortune of having Franklin Sirmans, who's the director of the Perez Art Museum in Miami, join us for a discussion, for a chat. I just want to thank everybody who's been joining these conversations. We like to begin these events by acknowledging that we're on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the New Credit, which has also been home to the Huron-Wendat and Haudenosaunee people through time. I'm glad that you've joined us on Zoom. A little bit about how this works is we have a conversation. There's a Q&A button, and if you have any questions, you can answer. And Kathleen and Annie, who are on our staff, will kind of take those questions and feed them to me. We've been getting lots of people, thousands of people are seeing these, which is kind of great. They're reposted online later if you want to see them. We've got some great speakers coming up in the coming weeks as well. Next week, Ann Pasternak, who's the director of the Brooklyn Museum, will be joining us. There's many events coming up on AGO.ca. The focus this next couple of weeks will be primarily on kind of people of color will be the main focus. And it's part of our work to kind of make sure that we move some of these questions and issues and discussions to the forefront. Today's format, again, it's pretty simple at the end. We'll click off, but I particularly want to thank TD and their ready commitment. TD Bank has been a great supporter of conversations, and this is one of them. So Franklin, welcome to AGO.ca. I'm very glad to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Stephan. And thanks to the AGO staff. It's a pleasure to be here in conversation with you. The last time we were together in person was in Atlanta, and we got to share the stage for a moment at AAMD in January. So awesome to be in conversation with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it as well. And we were speaking, both of us were talking about the education programs at our respective institutions in Atlanta. It's nice to be able to brag about our staffs in front of other directors. So, we're in I'd say a brutally tough time right now. I think we've got lots of big questions and really difficult times. The anti-Black violence and racism is pretty right there. And my question is who's an artist that you're looking at now and why? Like who's somebody who you're learning from right now?
Wow. How do you answer that question as as somebody who deals with art and artists all the time? It's like I got like at least 20 different images going through my head. I mean, I think the first like kind of month of being home, of working from home as we all are, was about playing back the images that were in my head that were inside of the museum and trying to make sure I felt my way around the space, at least in my own mind, on a daily basis, right? I can see the Carrie Marshall, I can see the Glenn Ligon, I can see our Jesus Rafael Soto sculpture outside, and all of this in a way of kind of remaining in touch as things further remove themselves from your orbit. And so now I'm home. I live with a few things. I don't think about those things so much. So this is all to say, it's a tough question to answer. And I've been doing so much time, probably not thinking about specific works of art or artists at all, that when confronted with the question, I'm going to revert back to a sort of standby of mine. And now that I think about it, it's kind of a perfect piece for the moment, right? It's a Cy Twombly painting called Say Goodbye to Catalyst. And it's in the collection of the Menil, and it's in the Cy Twombly. And it's a painting that I first saw actually in a group show at Gagosian many years ago in New York. And I think it was a small Gagosian warehouse space that was set up specifically for this massive, 60-foot long painting. And I got to convene with it. And when I worked in Houston for 4 years, repeatedly, and I miss it. And I think about it often. And in this moment of kind of trying to search for words and to discern poetry out of chaos. Oh, I can't think of a better painting.
Yeah, it's a fantastic painting and it's beautifully installed. Yeah, when I saw that, I must say, I don't think I got Cy Twombly until I saw that painting. I think
Yeah,
I understood him kind of intellectually, but I didn't
yeah.
get him. You know, it was like, there's the head understanding, but then there's the heart understanding. And
I totally hear you. I mean, I feel like I came into that painting in a kind of weird way, rather than through painting and through a conversation on Twombly as an artist. It was more through text. It was more through poetry. It was more, in a way, not an appendage, but as a complement to Jean-Michel Basquiat,
mhm.
somebody who also was inspired by Twombly and who dealt with text and painting to a great degree.
Yeah, and it has that calligraphic kind of moment. Yeah, yeah. Um, so you're tell us a little bit about Miami and the Perez, what you're thinking about, and how's it going? How's it going?
Woo! I mean, it's going. We started as a museum in 1984, and I would say that, you know, as we consider where we are today and this week in particular, we were founded off of a desire to be a place for community, a place
Mm.
that had a role in a civic conversation in a very deep and meaningful way. We were founded by a director named Jan van der Mark, who had come to Miami and did probably the most significant act of contemporary art collaboration that there is. And I don't only say that because we are in this week in which Christo passed.
Yeah,
But Surrounded Islands is
yeah,
the 1983 action that began as a conversation in 1980, initiated by Jan van der Mark, who went to Christo and to Jean-Claude and said, I want you to do something in Miami. He hadn't even opened up this museum yet. So it was a project, but they had worked together in Chicago at the MCA in 1969. And van der Mark, looking at the, you know, the geography of Miami and the background of Miami, 1980, of course, we had serious uprisings here with many deaths. And it was a situation not at all unlike the place we find ourselves today.
yeah,
Arthur McDuffie was killed in 1979 here in Miami, you know, right in the city, at the hands of police. And, you know, after the acquittals the following year, there was a lot of tumultuous times in this place. 1980 is also the same year as the Mariel boat lift. And we already had a pretty contentious situation of new immigrants that was already changing the way that this city looked and worked over the course of time from the 60s and 70s. And by the time you get this next huge influx from Cuba in particular, but many other places, Haiti, especially Haiti, you had a city that was dealing with a lot of different things and was at a point where the idea of bringing people together was absolutely
mm,
necessary. And I think that van der Mark went to Christo with that idea in mind, and Christo and Jean-Claude responded in kind with Surrounded Islands, which,
yeah,
you know, they would call, they said it was on the water. Of course, it's on the water of Biscayne Bay, because in this city, it is a city whose central park is on the water. And that's the truth. And
yeah,
I'm, you know, happy and proud that our museum today, although it did not begin on Biscayne Bay, where it has sat for the last 7 years, that is the spirit that we come from.
yeah.
And we've tried to maintain that spirit. And that's what we're trying to do this week. That's what we've been trying to do through the initial crisis of COVID and dealing with the, you know, it's hard to say crisis, but dealing with the events of the past week and the reckoning of histories of violence, particularly upon Black Americans.
Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with.
And how is the museum situating itself in that conversation and that dialogue?
So I would say that, let me back up a little bit to that idea of being a place that is civic minded. We began in a building that was done by Philip Johnson directly across from what is called Government Center. So this idea of conceptually aligning ourselves with civic conversation was embedded in the very geography and location of the institution. In that time, and I think in line with the developments of people in Miami and the changing demographics of Miami, we started collecting in the mid 90s. So in a time that was dominated by conversations around multiculturalism and around how our collection might reflect the changing developments, but also reflect Miami. And we say that we look at things through a Miami lens. So for instance, the very first work that was bought by this museum was a work by Lorna Simpson, a large photograph on felt that was acquired in 1995. So we had only begun collecting in 94. And so that's kind of the ground that we stand on.
It's a very different foundation than the vast majority of civic art museums.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think in line with looking at the place that we were, we did early exhibitions on Jesus Rafael Soto, knowing and absorbing the fact that our relationship to Latin America was certainly different than any other museum in our country or in the world for that matter. So we've had an allegiance in those spaces, I think, for a long time. So what we always talk about and what we consider to be our mission is that we are a museum of international, modern, and contemporary art, but we are led by wanting to be the best at presenting the work of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we look toward the African diaspora.
Yeah.
So these things are already part and parcel of what we do. I think what it is that we must do now is more of an exercise in listening and more of an exercise in trying to understand how we can truly embrace not only the words and the concepts, but to truly be a part of the machinery that goes into creating a great civic life here in Miami. And what I mean by that is, how do we now partner with other organizations? How do we collaborate with other organizations who have been doing work around social justice? Not that we haven't talked about it and hosted many programs and things like that, but what else can we do that is a little bit more concrete? Our head of education, Marie Vickles, is working on a project where we're inserting art kits, actual art making kits, into some of the relief efforts that are happening around the distribution of food.
Yeah.
So how do we, continue to play a more vital role, I think, is what we're all looking to do as we move forward and trying to come out of this time that none of us could have possibly imagined.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine what, March 1st. I think very few people realized what was about to hit and kind of how to move forward. When I think about our world, the museum world, there's often been quite a divide between the public program and the education programs, and the curatorial programs are thought that they're usually separate departments, and there's often significant tension in institutions between that. How are you trying to negotiate that? How are you trying to move it forward? What do you think the impediments for some of those changes are?
I mean, I think it works differently in different places and depends on the individuals. I happen to have two amazing individuals in those positions right now. I'm Chief Curator Renee Morales and Head of Education Marie Vickles. Both of them, I would say, are relatively new to their positions, and they came into those positions having already known and worked with each other. So, so there might be a spirit.
Yeah.
There could be potentially a spirit of collaboration
Yeah.
that may not have existed otherwise.
Yeah.
But what we do is we try to embrace the tension each and every day, and we try to test each other in helpful and just trying to be open to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever I'm there, I'm usually there during every other year for Art Miami or Art Basel Miami. And of course it's a lot, the world is all very commercial at that moment. Can you just tell me what it's like being in a place where you're kind of the hub of the commercial art world for a period of time, and then what's it like the other time? What's the toggle that you have to do there?
Well, within that moment, it's absolutely exhilarating.
Yeah.
It is exhausting, but absolutely exhilarating. From about Saturday evening, my wife and I try to make sure that our child will be taken care of by potentially someone else part of that week.
Yeah.
And we gear up and we focus on the thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that are coming to town. And there's no feeling like being able to go from Miami Beach to Miami, which are two very different places, although within the same county and just a few miles across the water, they're very different. And so what I try to do during that week is make sure I maintain my balance between the two.
Yeah.
And that means there could be a dinner on the beach, and then there's an opening in Little Haiti, and we try to not only the balance for us, but we try to share that with people so that their experience is not one that is solely defined by the fair. We love the fair, though. It's amazing. And I look forward to that this year more than I probably have any year ever.
Right.
You know, the time here when it's not in that week is a little bit quieter.
Yeah.
But you know, we try to just like you. We're all so busy trying to do what we love and what we think will leave an impact and bring us to a place that we are today, where we can actually talk about being a viable cog in the machinery of contemporary life and being a viable part of people's lives in a way that leads to something better, or a better way of living.
Yeah.
So we maintain our busyness, but there's nothing like that week.
The energy is spectacular, right? You know,
it's spectacular, and it's so much fun. I have to say, you know, I always say we're here 365 days a year, and we're here for our community, and our community is one that is here in Miami, hyper local at some times, but it always is global. And you know, we're all learning that now more than ever with how much we engage with each other digitally, that our audience grows online, and we love to also bring people into contact with each other during that week. And you know, we know that there are not so many places in the world. I mean, there are a lot of fairs, but there are only but so many places in the world that have that intense celebration of art and what art might mean in people's lives on a daily basis. So we're grateful for that.
So obviously things are shifting. COVID has hit kind of how to do exhibitions globally. You know, the kind of that social urgency on issues of anti-Black violence right there. How is it shifting or intensifying or focusing your staff and how they're thinking about things?
Well, I think from the very beginning, I mean, what COVID has meant and the challenge that it has presented is, you know, we thrive and love to be a place where we bring the community together. And I think when we talk about that from the point of view of physical togetherness. And to not be able to do that in this moment is difficult. You know, one of the things that I think about is here in Miami, we've also dealt with hurricanes in the past as a smaller departure point of a potential crisis situation. And what we do in that moment is we gather relief supplies, and we become a drop-off point, and we take on, one of those roles that can be actually vital and meaningful to people's lives in a very, very meaningful way. And COVID, the way that it works, we're not able to do that. So it has been a challenge in each and every way. But like you guys, we've pivoted to the digital sphere with just an incredible energy. I am amazed at what our staff has done in a short period of time. We closed on Sunday the 15th, and by Monday morning we were all zooming on our all staff meeting,
Yeah.
talking to each other. I had never, actually, I don't think I'd ever been on a Zoom call until then, until that Monday.
I had not, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I see the phone ringing on FaceTime and I'm like, no, come on.
What's that?
Yeah, like this that whole attitude has completely changed now.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do in that moment is also, post that moment, is think about what we're going to look like in the future. And we know that we're going to look very, very different. Our expectations around attendance will change due to social distancing and perception. And we're trying to deal with that. We're here in Miami. So one of the silver linings, of course, is weather for the most part. We are looking at the outdoors as part of our new indoors. What kind of programming are we going to do outside? We have a sculpture garden. We're going to bring that online. That'll be part of phase one way before we open up our interior space. And so what can we do? We'll experiment with even some exhibition ideas in that space as well. We're going to try a whole bunch of things. I think we're also becoming comfortable with the idea of experimentation, making mistakes and saying, I don't know. A lot.
Making decisions with remarkably little information,
Exactly. The uncertainty is mind-boggling. But here we are.
Or the certainty we had before might have just been an illusion.
Totally.
That might have been also.
Exactly.
So I know you spent time at LACMA, LA County Museum of Art, before you came to Miami. Tell us a little bit about Los Angeles and what you learned there, or observations, and how that links to kind of your sense of Miami. Like, what was that experience like?
It's totally informs. I mean, in one way, I have to say that, that was the second time that I actually worked with Michael Govan. I had worked with Michael when he first came on from the Guggenheim to Dia Center for the Arts, albeit at further ends of the hierarchy. I was a publications assistant when he became director. But I remembered that time fondly, and we maintained conversations. And of course, my experience being in Houston means that I was at the same family connection as Dia Center for the Arts, the DeMinil family. Right. So that was a continuation in some ways of a Dia experience, going to work for the Menil collection, where one of the founders of Dia, those are her parents. So we then when I get to LA to work with Michael again, I mean, it's a constant process of learning, and to be in Los Angeles and to be at LACMA in particular, right, which is like us, a museum that has county in its name, really. We are part and parcel of the system of government, and the system of civic life is built into our DNA in a similar way. So I learned a lot from that process. And it has definitely filtered into the way I think here in Miami. One of the things that we did there, and that I think is something we look at very closely here, is how do we take art outside of solely the museum walls? And so, there were projects there that we worked on in libraries in different parts of the city. Likewise, here, we've worked on a project called Inside Out, where we have taken kind of high resolution reproductions from our collection as part of a Knight Foundation project. And put them in different neighborhoods all around South Florida. And it's a way for people to engage with the museum who otherwise might not be able to come so readily to our space on Biscayne Boulevard in downtown Miami. Likewise, there is a component of working at LACMA that has to do with, what are you doing as far as the civic conversation?
Yeah.
And we've tried to follow up on that in big ways. And I think part of that is the desire for us here in Miami to collaborate and to partner with other organizations who bring something else to the table. Yeah. And so that's what we're trying to do, which is quite similar. The weather is also a little bit similar.
The weather here is spectacular 3 months a year.
I love Toronto weather. The last time I was there, it was a beautiful snowstorm.
Yeah, exactly. We're 25 minutes into the conversation. There's some questions here. I admire the Perez Art Museum Miami's commitment to the work of Black and Brown artists. What are some elements that make Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks feel at home in your museum?
Well, first off, hey, Wanda, I see who that's coming from. Good to see you. Got to see you in Sydney. I guess, as I said, it's something that we've tried to build into the DNA of the museum. So we have made it a point to collect in that sphere in a significant way for quite some time, and actually have a fund for African American art and an affiliate group that complements that, called the Ambassadors, which has been a part of the museum since we reopened in the new building in 2013. Likewise, we have a group called Latin American and Latinx Art Fund, which is another affiliate group that does not only social events like our ambassadors, but really is about putting generous support behind the programming and the exhibitions that are vital to creating a space that I believe is, if not welcoming simply based upon who made the work or what the work might address, it reflects a representation of the people who surround us, right? We know that, we're in a city that is, I think, quite different from many American cities. Yeah. We're a bilingual city. Our signage and our labels for every object, not unlike you guys, is done in 2 languages at least, and in some cases needs to be in 3 languages, including Creole. So we try to keep in mind all of these kind of things that are foundational to our being. Program-wise, of course, we do many things that are about collaboration and partnership. So another way of creating space with people who might not have come to the museum were it not for us working together with another organization that they know better. So those are some of the things that we try to do to try and create that space. And I think one of the most important things that almost goes without saying in that conversation now is that, there's nothing quite like going into a museum and seeing oneself reflected. I know for me growing up, I grew up with going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art as a kid with school. And that was cool, and that was one thing. I didn't see much of myself reflected there, but I also grew up the street from Studio Museum in Harlem, which of course, and I have to shout out Thelma Golden, somebody else that I continue to learn from on a daily basis, who, again, like Michael, a very dear person, is that there I did. And I think I walked away with knowing the value of what it's like to see oneself reflected in those spaces.
What's an exhibition you particularly remember from the Studio Museum?
Wilfredo Lam and his contemporaries.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a show that was done by the great Lowry Sims, who actually was 20th century at the Metropolitan for so many years. Okay. But it was a show that I guess it was one of the first shows that I remember being super conscious of, thinking, wow, how do I learn from this and what does it mean?
Yeah.
Whereas before that it was kind of like, yeah, it's cool to go to an opening with your parents or something. But now I'm actually thinking about that show and what it means. And it continues to reverberate for me, especially being here in Miami, and our relationship to LUM is quite special and important.
It's an extraordinary city, I've got to say. Let's see, we have some questions here. Are there plans to acquire and exhibit works by Caribbean artists? I know Ebony Patterson had a solo exhibition at the Perez. I believe there was also a group show of Caribbean artists. As you probably know, there's an extraordinarily large and dynamic Caribbean community here in Toronto as well.
Yeah, and shout out to all of them. Hey, Ken. I have to say, with this, this opportunity, there are so many good things that are happening online. It's almost a little bit too much. So I say that to say that I'm sorry I missed Julie Crooks, who was in conversation with my dear old friend Amanda Hunt from LA this afternoon, right before us.
It will be posted on AGOCA, so you can come back and see it. It was really great.
Awesome. And I say that, this conversation is one that obviously our institutions share, and we know that there are great things to come from this conversation together. But in the last year, we have set up a Caribbean Cultural Institute within our institution, thanks to the generous support of the Mellon Foundation. And so what that means is that we're taking off from, that stated desire and that part of mission, which directly talks about our relationship to where we are. And it's going to allow for us to really build on that in significant ways. Right. So a curator here, Maria Elena Ortiz, is working with another woman named Iberia Perez, who's also on our curatorial staff. And the two of them are forming programming. There's something coming up soon, exhibitions, acquisitions. So it is a full-on focal point for us each and every day. And, we just did a collectors council in which we acquired 8 works of art, all from galleries here in Miami. And I think 3 or 4, which is half of that group, have ties to the Caribbean. So it's something that it's part of our DNA, and we have to continue to build on it, and we will continue to build on it. And we will continue to have these conversations with you guys and see what we can make happen in the future.
I think we've got some projects coming.
Definitely.
You've got about 5 minutes left or so. Each of you have studied art history and worked at museums as curator before serving as art museum directors. Can you share some of the skill sets or lessons you've prepared that have prepared you for your current roles?
Stephan, you want to take that first?
Yeah, we both share. We both went to small progressive liberal arts schools. I went to Hampshire and you went to Wesleyan. I must say, extraordinary teachers. One in particular, Stuart Levine, who, really helped frame, I think, a foundation of my art history, which was particularly feminist in perspective. And I'm forever grateful for that, because I may have learned a different canon than other people. And I think that's been good in terms of being able to put me a little bit on the outside in terms of my lens, and maybe a little more open that how much something is worth doesn't necessarily indicate its importance at all. So that was, and then lateral thinking, just the liberal arts thing is kind of broad, but that was a key
Absolutely.
part. Yeah.
That was helpful. I would add, at times, willful ignorance. Walking into this position as the first time and coming from a curatorial position in LA, my ignorance to certain things can be helpful, continues to be helpful at certain times. But then I also just like the experience of having worked with Michael both in New York and Los Angeles, and the experience of working with Joseph Helfenstein in Houston at the Manil Collection greatly informed the way that I have come to the job now. And also I think it's, it's a love for the objects and a love for paintings and sculptures and videos and photographs that comes from the experience of wanting to curate and juxtapose those things together. And if you don't have that as a director, then I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, it's the love of art. It's like, and the love of people. I must say that
Exactly.
it's been kind of lonely. I don't like museums when nobody's in there, right? I think artworks really do need a viewer. One question I like to end with is, what's a work of art that you have at home that you and your wife particularly love?
Oh, I don't think I can answer that question. Will lead to violence somewhere.
Okay.
No, my wife Jessica and I love everything that we live with, and I only say that because we live with things that are probably have been given to us in the past, or something that I traded for as a freelance writer long ago. And I think that we hold those things dear, and we can't privilege one over the other.
Okay, you love all your children.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much, Franklin, for joining us for this conversation. If there's anything
Thanks,
we can
Stephan.
do, and I look forward to collaborating with you.
Oh, we will. I
Miami.
look forward to it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.